Welcome and good evening to each of you. I'm Michael McGrath, president of Preservation Delaware. PDI is Delaware's nonprofit focused on protecting the historical and archaeological treasures of our state. We're committed to preserving the shared stories of all Delawareans. Today, we're honored to present Kara Briggs from the State Historic Preservation Office. More about Kara in just a minute. We're recording this workshop, and it will be available in a few weeks on our PDI YouTube channel for you to revisit and share. As you know, this workshop is free and made possible by our PDI members. We ask you to consider becoming a member and adding your voice to the cause of preserving our past, the connections to our shared future. You may join or donate to our cause at our website, preservationdE.org/support. Again, that's preservationdE.org/support. Now let me acquaint you with Leila Hamroun, our moderator, who will introduce Kara and manage our webinar. Leila Hamroun is an accomplished design professional with 25 years of national and international heritage preservation projects. In addition to a master's degree in urban planning and public policy from the University of Delaware, she holds an architecture degree from the Algiers School of Architecture and a diploma in historic preservation from the Center for the Historic Studies and Conservation of Ancient Manuscripts of Monuments from the École de Chaillot in Paris, France. Her multilingual and multicultural background allows her to be equally comfortable in English, French, and Arab cultures and societies. Leila possesses a uniquely nuanced perspective on the preservation and management of the built cultural heritage and a distinguished track record in sustainable design strategies. Her portfolio includes a wide range of landmark projects, from the historic Atlantic City Boardwalk Hall in New Jersey to the U.S. Capitol grounds. Finally, closer to our home, the updated Historic Area Commission design guidelines and standards for the Newcastle National Historic Landmark District in Newcastle, Delaware. Leila is a registered architect in Connecticut, Delaware, New Jersey, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. Welcome, Leila.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you for the introduction and welcome everybody amongst us. Welcome, Kara. I'm delighted to be your moderator and master of ceremonies this evening. I still remember when I reached out to Kara for some preservation issues, for some CLG grants at the Delaware Division of Historical and Cultural Affairs. So I'm delighted that we're sharing this panel together. Obviously, Kara will be sort of taking the lead on the content, and I'm sure everybody will be quite interested. Before I introduce Kara, let me talk about a little bit of housekeeping issues. This webinar, as Mike mentioned, is being recorded. You can all see in your box that there are a couple of areas. There's a Q&A, question and answer button on the lower menu bar of your screen. Please feel free to click on that and put any questions you may have. We will be taking some questions, probably a little bit around mid-presentation after Kara stops on one section, and again towards the end of the session. Feel free to put your questions there. There's, I think, a method that you can actually high five or put a thumbs up on the previous question so that we will know that it has more interest. There's also the chat box where, we have some welcoming messages. If you're having any technical issues, let us know, and we will try to address those quickly. And last but not least, after I do the introduction for Kara, we're going to have two polls. We're going to have an intro poll just before, sort of to gauge the familiarity of the attendants with the topic of this workshop. Find out a little bit more about your background generally, as in, whether you're attending as a homeowner, as a real estate specialist, as a contractor or developer, and then just your familiarity on the topic of this workshop. And then at the end, we will bookend this with an exit poll where we'd love to get your feedback. Let me present Kara in a nutshell. Kara joined the staff at the Delaware Division of Historical and Cultural Affairs as an architectural historian. I should have said in the Historic Preservation Office. We always use SHPO for short. And she's based in the main office on the Green in Dover. Her responsibilities include managing the SHPO's tax credit program, hence how wonderful it is to have her here, but also conducting cultural resource reviews of federally funded or permitted projects for Section 106 compliant with the National Historic Preservation Act, providing coordination services for state designated certified local governments, go Newcastle, and also oversight of various preservation easements, monitoring the enforcement of the easement provisions and technical assistance to property owners, as well as negotiating and completing those easements. Tara holds a master's degree in urban affairs and public policy with a concentration in historic preservation from the University of Delaware, where she also earned certificates in museum studies and human subjects training. And I do love that one. She has a bachelor's degree in interior design from Savannah College of Arts and Design. And in 2018, she completed the Arcus Professional Fellowship Program, which is an online leadership development course and networking opportunities for emerging leaders in the cultural heritage and historic preservation movements. So we are really very lucky to have Kara amongst us here. She specialized in how to develop plans and tactics for advocacy strategies, as well as using collective impact frameworks, solve preservation challenges, risk mitigation, and evaluation techniques. So she has worked over the years as a consulting architectural historian and project manager for private companies, as a collections manager and research assistant for UD's Center for Historic Architecture and Design, an exhibit designer, a curator of collections for the Historical Society of Delaware, and collection management curator at the Andrew Lowe House, right in Savannah, Georgia, as well as a site supervisor at the John Dickinson Plantation. She's authored Images of America, 40 Acres, about the Wilmington neighborhood where she lives. So extremely accomplished and distinguished guest speaker we have today. We are very happy to have you amongst us. So welcome aboard. And so just before I get started, I'm going to launch a poll. You should be able to see it and see how. So does everybody see the poll on their screens? If you don't, give us a message in the chat box. We're going to leave the poll open for about 30 seconds and just feel free to vote. I know people are viewing the questions, but I don't know if you're able to vote. We have a first question about have you applied or not for historic preservation tax credits? And yes, the first one, it's always that first one. And then your interest in historic preservation, homeowner, real estate professional, developer, contractor. Okay, a good amount of homeowners, contractors, welcome aboard. And then the last question, perfect. How familiar are you with the historic preservation tax credit? We'll let this go for, a little bit, few more minutes. Okay, so if I share the results so far, can everybody see the poll results? So pretty much, and I know we sort of try not to take too much time with the poll. We can also do the poll at the end and reopen it. But we have for 75% of the people, they haven't applied for the program, but we have a few who have. And then we have a good balance between, homeowners, yes, but, real estate professionals, developers, contractors, and these are multiple choice, which means you can be both. Great, perfect. And the familiarity, this is exactly why we have Kara. So this is going to be great. Thank you, everybody, for participating. And Kara, it's all yours.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me this evening. I'm really looking forward to this, and I hope that as we move forward through the presentation and we get to questions, hopefully I can help as best I can, and hopefully we'll have some people very excited to take part in our program. So yes, as Leila mentioned, I do manage both the federal and state historic tax credit programs for the state of Delaware's Division of Historical and Cultural Affairs, also known as the State Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO. There are a multitude of benefits to both the state and federal programs, some of which include encouraging the preservation of historic buildings, encouraging the reuse of previously vacant buildings, stimulating the local economy, and allowing rehabilitation projects to be economically viable. There are fine differences to each program, but both maintain the primary function of investment in the appropriate rehabilitation and reuse of historic buildings. Established in 1976, the Federal Historic Tax Credit Program offers a tax credit equal to a percentage of the rehabilitation costs for a certified rehabilitation of a certified historic property. I know that that's a mouthful, and we will get back to that later, talking about a certified rehabilitation and a certified historic property. The credits involved with the federal tax credit program are 20% for income producing, also known as depreciable properties. There's no limit on the amount of tax credits that are assigned each year, and tax credits can be applied against a federal income tax liability. The Delaware Historic Preservation Tax Program was created by state legislation in 2001, renewed by legislative action in 2010, and has been amended several times since then. Most recently in November of 2018, where we did have some rather significant changes to the program. Currently, the program is authorized through fiscal year 2026. The State Historic Preservation Program, the state program, repeatedly proves to be highly successful in promoting the rehabilitation of historic properties throughout the state. Each fiscal year, 8 million in tax credits are made available to owners of historically significant properties. The State Historic Preservation Tax Credit Program offers a tax credit award that's calculated as a percentage of the qualified expenditures for the project and adjusted for any other applicable criteria as outlined in our program guidance. So for example, a property owner may receive a 20% credit for a property designated as income producing, also known as a depreciable building. 30% in credits may be awarded for an owner occupied residential building, and 30% tax credits may be awarded for income producing buildings that are committed to low income housing. Since the creation of the state program in 2001 through fiscal 2020, which was the end of June last year, over 85.5 million in tax credits have been awarded to 290 properties, leveraging over 408 million in investment. And so far, I have thrown a lot of facts and figures at you all. And so I'd like to take a moment and take a break from some of that just to share with you some of the before and after examples of properties that have already benefited from the use of historic tax credit program. And some of these examples have used both a combination of state and federal tax credits. So here we have a before of the 400 block of North Market Street in Wilmington. And here we have the after. Another example, we have 2 East 7th Street in Wilmington. The cross street is North Market. And the after. and another moving further downstate in Ocean View, Delaware, a before of the Ocean View Historical Society. And the after.
So, Kara, I have there's one. I think this would be just more just take a few questions kind of on the intro, because you said that you did put a lot of information.
Yes.
We do have one question from an attendee that I'll share with you, which I guess requires for clarification, saying which category would historic buildings fall under for the tax credit? And I'm thinking potentially this might be a question about, do they have to be listed on the register or any specifics? So can you give any guidance as to that, like the categorization of your building so that you can be deemed to be, a candidate for these kind of tax credit programs?
Yes, yes. And we will get into that a little more in depth later on, but just to answer that question right off the bat, for properties to be eligible for this program, they must be either listed individually to the National Register, or they may be included as part of a historic district, whether that district is listed on the National Register or if it's a locally recognized historic district, and that the building in question is said to be contributing to that district.
Okay.
So for example, if for anyone familiar with Wilmington and the Cool Springs neighborhood, if there is a building located within that district, and so long as the building looks today very much the way that it did at the time of its listing, that's all part of the part one, and we'll get into that later, then that property would qualify for this program.
Okay.
I'm going to go back just for point of clarification. So some of these buildings here in Wilmington they were all part of the historic district, the Market Street City Historic District. And so because they were there within, they qualified.
And then, well, I mean, I'm glad you brought the slide back, because I had a quick question regarding these. You mentioned that you have different programs, whether it's income producing, owner occupied residential, and income producing buildings committed to low income housing. When we look at the examples that you've shown us, could you tell us which categories each one sort of fell under?
I would be happy to. Tonight, I've provided examples of these would be, this one on 7th and Market would be considered an income producing property. It's a mixed use building with a restaurant on the ground floor and apartments in the upper floors.
Okay.
Now, this is what the building was originally used for: commercial space on the bottom and apartments on top. So the use is still the same. The applicant took great pains to do research and try to find what the building how it originally appeared. And, we can see that someone was very horrible to this beautiful building, covering it in stucco and concrete, but its scale, its size, its shape, the massing, it still has the look and feel that it did originally. The majority of the integrity is still there in the way that it originally looked. And so they could put it back after doing extensive research, especially on the tower, to bring this building back to some semblance of what it originally looked like. And going back to your original question, this would be considered a depreciable or commercial property. Same is true of these in Wilmington. And I'm always very careful to protect the individual homeowner, property owner. So I have and I don't show pictures without getting permission first, because, you know, this is, I try to be protective of
Mhm.
people.
Of course, yeah.
So there's some depreciables, and this would be considered a nonprofit. Nonprofit properties are allowed to participate in the state program.
Okay.
That includes churches as well, when I say nonprofits.
And then to your point, I also appreciate that, you know, the your discretion and confidentiality of the people who've applied. I have worked with clients in Delaware who have properties of similar size and scale and period who've benefited from the program as homeowners for restoration work that they've done on their properties. And that would be the straightforward person who occupies the building and wants to do right by it and gets the support of the state with the tax credits. Okay, great. I see there's one more question in the Q&A box. And okay, can the property be both income producing and owner occupied, i.e. owner occupied with one apartment? That's an interesting combination.
That is an interesting combination. I don't think I have ever had that before. Typically, it's that would most likely fall under the category of mixed use, depreciable, given that there's a store on the ground floor, but typically we don't have that happen. But everything is on a case-by-case basis. So if that person wants to reach out to me, I can help them. We can have a conversation.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Kara, is that ultimately you do have to be one category or the other. You can't, if you excuse the colloquialism, you can't double dip when you go for the tax credits. If your application, you're going, and that comes to that question, either income producing or you're a residential building, residential as in home, you know, owner occupied.
That is correct. It's one or the other. You are either categorized as depreciable or as a nonprofit or as a residential homeowner living in the residence. So that I think that's why in this case there would have to be a conversation just to make sure.
Okay, and so we have one more question, and then don't worry, the other questions we will address at the end, but I do want Kara to get, because she has quite an interesting program. The last question is related to the question that the first answer you gave, where the co-chair of the Delaware City Historic Preservation Commission is saying not all houses opted into the historic district, but are of historic significance. Are they still eligible for the tax credit program?
If I'm understanding the question, we're talking about properties that are located outside the boundaries of the historic district.
I believe that's the way the question is asked, and saying they're not in the boundaries, but they're of historic significance. Are they still eligible for the program?
Typically, the buildings have to be located within the actual boundaries of the district. There are such things as, we refer to them as legacy nominations, where the districts were, when they were first submitted to the National Register, they were not as in-depth as one might be written today. So you might have a full list of properties located within. You may have, in one of those legacy nominations, which is what we might be talking about here, if a building is not necessarily there on the actual list, but it's still within the district, this is something that we can work with, because it's there, it's within the boundary lines.
Yes, and there has been a clarification. I think they're talking about buildings that are not listed, but that are within the district. I guess this comes to the question whether they're in the district as contributing or not, or non-contributing or not part of the district. And that may be something that's like a local district particularity that could perhaps be answered like in a sidebar later. But I think that's the clarification came saying, no, they're within the district, but they're not listed. So,
If they are in the district and but the building is not necessarily listed on, and I think that's what we're talking about, a legacy
Yeah.
nomination here. But that is something that could be worked with. I know that there are other districts in the state, even presently, that are seeking to expand upon their existing boundaries. So yes, this is something that I'd like to have a conversation with this person as well, see how I can help.
great, perfect. So we do have a couple more questions, but I think I'd like you to sort of just to keep on going because we have a lot of really good information that could actually inform some of the questions that are coming. And then we will circle back to those questions.
Yes, and I have a feeling that maybe some of the questions that are coming in might be answered in the next couple of slides.
Exactly. Great.
Okay. Okay. So let me go back. We showed this. And okay, so who qualifies for these federal programs? Any person with income tax liability, including individual property owners, corporations, renters, or leaseholders. Now, this does come along with some conditions. Obviously, that person renting or holding the lease would have to get permission and consent of the property owner. But this, we have had examples of this in the past. I must note that in the federal historic preservation tax credit program, residential homeowners, these properties do not qualify for the federal program. But for the state program, similar to the listings there for federal, any person, any individual, again, with a income tax liability may apply to the state program. Any form of company, corporation, partnerships, any estate, trust, or lawful joint venture. Again, any of the above under a lease contract for 5 years or longer. And applicants who qualify for only Delaware's programs, such as homeowners or nonprofits. I mentioned churches earlier. They must meet certain minimum expenditures. Typically, this is spending a minimum of $5,000 for the homeowner. So someone had asked about this earlier. What is a certified historic property? In order to qualify for either the federal or the state program, this program is broken up into different applications, and I'll touch on that later. And the very first application is your Part 1. And this is where the applicant comes to us with this paperwork to say, yes, I am a certified historic property. I've used images here from our CRIS system. This is showing you a map of the Smyrna Historic District. The area shaded in pink is the district. And alongside that is the National Register form, the first page of that form for the district. If any of you were to have this in front of you as you were leaf through this paperwork, it has a full list of properties within the district to show that, you know, number 14 Main Street, this is located within the historic district, and it is considered a contributing property to the Smyrna Historic District. So again, as I mentioned this before, a certified historic property is one that is individually listed in the National Register of Historic Places, located in a National Register listed historic district, and certified as contributing to the significance of that district, or one that is located in a locally recognized historic district and certified as contributing to the significance of it. Now, when I say a locally recognized historic district, there are certain towns and cities within our state that have locally recognized districts. They have all of the paperwork, the official paperwork to go along with it, just like we have for National Register. But it's, again, it's locally recognized. So you can get this information from where you live. Eligible projects. Eligible projects must be determined to be a certified rehabilitation. This means that the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, which in brief, exist to protect a property's integrity and character defining features. And this must be followed in the proposed work. In a federal application, the expenditures or cost of rehabilitation must exceed the prehabilitation cost of the building. Applicants who qualify for only Delaware's program, such as homeowners or nonprofits, they must meet certain minimum expenditures of $5,000.
And just on this one slide, Kara, there is one question that came up in the box that I think is relevant because where you're at. What the question says, for these programs, does the property owner have to complete the application before the work begins?
This is true. I'm going to get to that later on as well, but yes, this is true. So the application process, there's 3 parts to the application. The part 1, and this is where the building would be certified by our office as being a certified historic property and therefore qualifies for the program. The part 2 is the certification of rehabilitation. And that's what we're talking about now. Mm-hmm. This is your proposed work. And again, whether we're talking about a state application or a federal, this is the proposed work. I have a historic home and I need a new roof. I need to paint it. I have a lovely wooden front porch. It's original, but it's rotted. I plan on saving what I can, and anything that I can't save, I will replace in kind, meaning whatever I replace it with it will look, feel, same dimensions. It will look what was there, replacing it so it looks like it should. So, but for any of this work or any of this proposed work, your part 2, your proposal of work, it's got to be signed and certified by our office before the work can begin. I will often tell people, don't even pick up a hammer. You know, if this is what you're proposing to do, wait for us to sign off on it. And once you have that back, then you can start your work. But that's a very significant, I'm glad someone asked that question, because that's one of the biggest changes that came through the changes to the program back in November of 2018.
Yeah,
and no prior work is accepted.
And that's why I want to bring it up now, because you will be going in depth afterwards, but I think it's good that it should be in everybody's sort of radar as they're listening to everything that you're going into great detail after. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So when we talk about certified rehabilitation, there are 10 basic principles created by the National Park Service. They are referred to as the Secretary of Interior Standards and Guidelines for Rehabilitation. We often will just refer to them as the standards. And they are basically 10 common sense principles that support the guidance for promoting consistent preservation practices, to allow for repair or alteration of an original building for contemporary use. And also just to promote the repair of historic features in order for these buildings to retain their character. I think it's very important when approaching any of these projects, no matter what type of building we're talking about, whether it's a single family home, if it's a commercial property, even if we know this one is defined as this architectural style, this is, this is Italianate, so on and so forth. Even so, every building has its own special features, and the buildings are almost like, they're almost like people. We are all the same, but we're all different. We all have different needs. We all have different things that have to be addressed. And so these standards and guidelines are vitally important to help all of us make sure that we do what's right for these buildings when we go to preserve, protect, rehabilitate, and take care of them. So when we talk about cost, we often refer to costs associated with these buildings as qualified expenditures. So what does that mean to be a qualified expenditure? These are the costs associated with the rehabilitation of the project. To simplify that explanation, these are the costs of anything that has to do with the building that is, I will often say, that's nailed down. I mentioned before, putting on a roof, painting. We will cover the installation of wall-to-wall carpet, lighting fixtures, so long as these are permanent fixtures. We're not talking about a table lamp, but pendant lighting, for your kitchen or something like that. It's basically anything that is nailed down and used, exactly for the purposes of rehabilitating the building in question. You can claim expenditures, for example, the rental equipment, rental of construction equipment. You need a lift when you go to put that new roof on. We also handle site costs. So let's say you have an oil tank in your basement, but you're no longer going to use that means to heat your home. You want to switch to electric. A qualified cost would be digging up the land around your house, renting the equipment to do that digging and pulling that out. We pay for the remediation of getting rid of that tank. And then we also have something for, we refer to it as site costs, which comes in at 10%. This is only for the state program, but it's up to 10% of the total qualified expenditures. So after digging that hole and pulling everything out, a qualified expenditure is putting the land, the garden, all of anything that you had back into place so it looks the way you did before you tore everything off. I have a list here in front of you all about costs that are not accepted. You may notice demolition in there. This is in the case of if you have a building that is intact, your floor plan is intact, meaning you walk into the house, there's your hallway wall, you've got a double parlor, you move from there into the dining room, but you'd rather have an open floor plan and you want to knock all of that out. That is not something that would be accepted because you are destroying original fabric, you're destroying the original layout. But let's say your plaster wall is failing in your dining room and it's going to be easier for you to take that down. You can do that so long as the wall is covered, because originally it was covered. If you're knocking out the plaster to expose brick and you're not going to put anything back up, that's not permissible. If you don't have the funds or means, or you just don't want to put plaster back, you'd rather put drywall, that's acceptable because you are still covering the wall. But just costs that are not accepted are again, things that are not nailed down. So yes, you could have wall-to-wall carpeting, but you can't have, you cannot, a qualified cost would not be an area rug or light bulbs, or if you decided to buy lunch for your contractor. Those costs are not accepted. It's just whatever is nailed down and used specifically for the building long-term and a permanent installation. So there's really a lot of information that goes along with this. So I wanted to give you all an overview of both the federal and the state programs. If you'd like for me to come back at another time and go more in depth to the actual tax credit application pieces and parts, I'd be happy to do that. But for tonight, I'll just tell you what they are and how this process goes. For both state and federal, and I touched on this earlier, the part one is your certification of a historic property. This application usually comes to us with your application, who you are, the name of the property, if you know if it has a name, where it's located, if it is individually listed to the National Register, if it is contributing to a National Register or locally designated district. It's extremely helpful if you have that documentation to include that along with a photo of the building as it looks today, along with a map showing us where it's located. And this is something as easy as just going on to Google and printing out the map that way. You can also utilize our CRISP system, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then there is the part two application, portion of the application known as the certification of rehabilitation. And basically, this is your proposal of work. This is where you tell us what it is you want to do. As the program stands today in its most recent changes from 2018, what we require is your proposal of work, your contractor invoices, showing us what it's going to cost to have this work done. If there is going to be interior work done as well, we like to see some sort of a floor plan and photo ID, because before photos are very important with this part of the application. You know, you say you want to, you need to replace your roof. We need pictures of the roof so that we can see the deterioration. I made a reference earlier to replacing a porch in kind. We need to see the porch and any detail shots. If the wood is rotted and or termites have gotten to it, it's important to see this, because when this part of the process is done, let's say it's signed off on, it is certified by our office, and we tell you, okay, good, you're good to go ahead and start your work. And then so much time has passed, you come back to us with your part three, and this is basically the after portion of the process. Same as you had done with the part two, give us the same information, only now instead of contractor quotes, these are the invoices. This is what you paid. Because we're fully aware that, you know, prices can change. You could have been expecting to pay X for drywall, but any number of things could have happened. It got wet on the way to your house or whatever might be. And now the price has gone up and that's changed. So we understand that. So for your part 3, your application, your contractor receipts, and again, your pictures. This time, they'll be your after photos taken from the same vantage point of those that were included in the part 2. And if everything is as it should be, and everything went the way that we all needed to meet the rules and regulations, then the application is certified. And then the next step is the award of credits. And for the state process only, there is a form called the Request for Credit Award Form. And that's basically the official paperwork that we then give to you so that you as a Delaware resident can move forward with the divisions of banking and revenue to get your tax credits. Whether you are submitting just a state application or whether you are choosing to do both state and federal, all of these applications come through our office first. We are responsible for sending any federal applications on to the National Park Service. So basically everything is funneled through our office first.
One quick question about this,
Sure.
Kara, briefly, because
Yes.
I know we have maybe about 15 minutes left. Just briefly, in terms of timeline, could you give like quick review times? Let's say if somebody submits the certification, what's a timeline for the review that they would expect before they heard back from the state after each certification submission, after part 1, part 2, part 3?
For every application, we try to keep to a 30-day timeline. And I will add that the part 1 and part 2 can be issued to our office at the same time. You don't have to wait. If you already know and you've got all of your paperwork in order for the part 2, you can submit to our office the part 1 and the part 2 at the same time. Okay. Just again, please make sure that you haven't started any work.
Before submitting part 1,
I really, it's heartbreaking sometimes to have to tell people when they have given me their part 2 and then, oh yeah, we already did this work. And it's really a shame because it's a hard and fast rule that went into effect in November of 2018 that no prior work is accepted.
Okay. And then so that's noted about 30 days and 30 days for the reviews.
Now it doesn't necessarily take that long.
Yeah, but that's
I do try to get them in before that. It has been a struggle as of late with COVID. We are working on a hybrid schedule. And the National Park Service only accepts paper submissions. So depending upon, when I say hybrid, I think we all know, I think we're all gotten used to that at this point. I might be working from home X number of days a week, and then I try to get into the office. And if an applicant hasn't submitted all of their paperwork, it takes time to just get everything else in order, reaching out and asking for additional information.
Then that takes,
so it can take longer, but I do really try to stick to the 30-day review period.
Perfect. And then just a brief question to follow up. Between the part 2 and the part 3, is there a sunset provision? Like if they've submitted part 2, is there a maximum of time by which the construction should occur before they can actually apply?
Apply for their part 3?
No, like if you got the part 2 okay, is there a limit, like you have to do the work within 5 years or you have to do the work within 3 years? Or does it have a sunset provision? Like if you did a part 2 certified, but you didn't do the construction for 4 years, do you have to start over again? Or does it remain valid as long as you're doing what was in the approved part 2?
We do have a time limit. That is true for the federal. It's got to be within 24 months.
Okay, so within 24 months. Perfect. If not, you have to restart the process.
That is true.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, we can. And just as an FYI, we have about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
Obviously, if anybody after wants to stay longer for answering more questions, we will do that, but just as an FYI.
All right, well, I know that I've hit everybody with a lot of information, so I was going to stop here in terms of comparing the two programs and just give some extra information for National Register and Chris. For those of you that are home and you haven't gotten started on something like this before and you want to know more, is my house listed on the National Register? You can link to the NPS website where they do have a listing of all properties, historic districts, buildings that are individually listed or included in districts. You can look up this information. I have the website there on the, and this is a great website to play around with too. You'll find another section, Technical Preservation Services, also known as TPS, and you will find all sorts of information. The National Register bulletins, which are all numbered and all are specific to certain applications of rehabilitation and restoration process. Everything from brick repointing, how to treat rotted wood, just plaster repair, anything you can think of, there's a bulletin for it. It's a wonderful, wonderful resource. And then I wanted to brag a little bit about our online system, our CRIS system, the Cultural and Historical Resource Information System. This is also another way to see if a property is listed in the National Register. It also includes properties located within downtown development districts, properties that are individually listed to the National Register. I can't remember if I already just said this, but every district that's located within the state. And it's a really wonderful resource. It's something that is fluid. We are still building on it. In some cases, you may be able to access cultural resource forms on certain properties. Again, in some cases, but it's a wonderful resource. It even has time-lapse photos where you can see how an area looked, in 1930 and 1965, present day, and make comparisons. It's a wonderful, wonderful resource.
I will second that. It's a really good resource and very user-friendly too.
Good. And just a little more information on how to access this site. This DelawareHistory.gov. You can also click a link there to get more information on our tax credit program. All of the applications are online. They're up on that site. If you need help, I'm available, happy to help however I can. Any sort of advice that you may need, anything on how to define the character of your home. What architectural style is this? Advice in determining, your project. Yeah, you want to replace your roof, but it's cedar shake. And what products are out there? Can I use a polycarbonate, a substitute material? Any sort of question that you have, I'm happy to help. I have contractor lists of that not necessarily we're endorsing any one person, but these are the people that we know are out there and available and knowledgeable in preservation applications. If you want to get started on this process and you have questions on how to do it, I'm happy to help. I will ask that you all keep in mind that primarily I'm working from home. And and sending me an email is truly the best way to get a hold of me, and I'll give you that information in a minute. A few more websites to share, and I'll just leave this up for a little bit. The illustrated guidelines for rehabilitation of historic buildings. There's a variety of park service training webinars. The preservation briefs that I mentioned earlier, those are the briefs that talk about everything from masonry, repointing to, again, mortar strike points and so on and so forth. These are just great resources. And then there is the link to our tax credit program and applications and all sorts of information. And again, if anyone has extra questions, if they want to talk to me outside of this, here is my contact information. That telephone number that I've provided, that's the main number to our office. But again, the best way to reach me is through email at kara.briggs@delaware.gov.
Great. So this is great. And I mean, I know it's a lot of information. We have a good number of open questions in the box. So what I would like to do, because I want to be respectful of people who signed up for a 1 hour webinar, it is going to, if people want to stay on a little bit after 7 o'clock, Tara definitely said that she'd be willing to answer the questions. I would like to bring up our exit poll just to get a reading of the temperature of the room and other information. And then for those who wanted to stay with us, please, bear with us and we'll answer a few more questions. And yes, as Mike mentioned in the beginning, we will be making the presentation available online for those who have attended. So let me just start the second poll quickly. I'd appreciate the feedback because it does help us, gauge your interest and also prepare for future workshops. So you should all be seeing the poll, which is pretty much asking you if you'd be interested in more specific topic workshops where Kara could drill in, whether you're a homeowner or real estate professional. And also just a general note as to what other topics you might be interested in for future PDI workshops. And I'll leave that up for 1 minute while people, provide answers, and we'll take a look. I think we have a number of questions, and I'll try to get to some. One was about they're in the process of purchasing a home, but they have not purchased it yet. So, so can they submit the application, or do they have to have ownership of the home before they can submit the application?
They really should have ownership of the home first.
Okay. So that's one of the, that one is a quick one. Another is, I think it circled back to a question that properties have been deemed eligible for the National Register, but are not listed by the owner. So are they eligible for the tax program?
They would have to, if the building is not located within a district, one other way, and it's a bit of a stretch, but if that person has something from their local government stipulating that this building is in fact considered a locally designated landmark, with real background information, in terms of context, so on and so forth. Same type of information you might find within a National Register listing. Then there is a possibility, I'm not making any promises, but that is a possibility that this would allow for someone to come forward and be an applicant. You have to have that local government state and give evidence to the fact that this building is a locally designated landmark. It's significant to that area.
Okay, great. Now there is one question that's very helpful. A good question from Dave Martin. Are there sample forms filled on your website? Is that part of the information that's readily available?
Sample completed forms?
Yes, sort of like.
Is that the question? I do not have sample completed forms.
Okay,
Mainly because some of these forms have sensitive information.
okay,
And so just to protect those previous applicants, we don't put those up. But if anyone ever needs help with filling out the forms, they certainly can reach out to me, and I can provide guidance.
perfect. I'm quickly sharing the poll results, and it's good to see that we have a good range of topics that we can pursue at a later date. Thank you so very much, everyone. And again, because we are past at 7:01, for those of you who have to go, we understand, we appreciate. For those who are willing to stay, the record, we'll keep on having a bit of a conversation for another perhaps 5 minutes. Kara, if that's okay with you?
That's fine with me.
I think there's one question that's kind of interesting that piggybacks. Somebody noted that a nonprofit, or for example, a church, is exempt from paying taxes. So how does the tax credit program benefit them?
They are still able, so for example, a church or a nonprofit agency, they are able to take part in the program. And instead of, I didn't get into the revenue portion of this. So if there's more questions after I explain, please feel free to reach out. So once an applicant has finished the process, they have the part 3 is done. We've signed off on it and said, yes, you've done everything according to Secretary of Interior standards. Then they claim the credits. After that point, there are tax forms that need to be completed. Now, a nonprofit such as a church has to sell those credits. They cannot keep them for the very reason that you had just mentioned. Now, a homeowner, they can then keep those credits, or they can transfer them to a family member. Those credits are theirs to do whatever they see fit. But the nonprofit, they have to either sell or transfer their credits to someone else.
Okay, so, and that's good because it does piggyback on a question that had been raised about the potential for selling tax credits. Now, one thing I think we'll take, yes, there will be a copy of the slides made available. One question I think that's on a lot of people's minds, and we will have another workshop on this topic, is if the work involves regrading the site to make the site more flood resistant to protect the property, would the work qualify? Because that's interesting, because it's not about the building itself, but it's regrading the site and ultimately protecting the property. Would that qualify or not?
The landscaping, it goes in line with whatever work is also being done at the property. I keep going back to roof and painting and so on and so forth. If you've already spent your $5,000 base so that you can qualify, another qualification to being a part of this program, and then you are having site work done for, I don't know, climate change adaptation or deal with flooding of some sort, the landscaping costs can be brought into play, but it's not something that is separate from the rest of the, you can, simply put, you cannot apply for just the landscape.
Got it. So it has to be connected with other work that you're doing on the house itself, and it's or the property of the building, on the physical
Yes.
structure, and it's part of that bigger picture.
Yes.
I think now one question to circle back to, again, this notion I think that's important about, houses, whether they are contributing based on their period, but they're not included. One question is like, can you get a credit for a structure on a property that is thought to be constructed in a time period that might make it contributing, but was not included in the official description, whereas another structure on the main house was included? So I think it's like, if you have a description of the house that's contributing, where that's the part that's included in the significance for making it eligible, but then there are other portions on it, I think, that were not. would you have to, I think the focus is if you have a building that's considered to be contributing, even though it has additions that are not related directly to the period of significance, you look at the property as a whole, right? And you try to make sure that the interventions do not negatively impact the significance or the historic fabric, and that it's still part of what you're doing to maintain the property. Is that correct?
When we receive a Part 1 application, what we do is compare the property as it is today with how it was described when it was listed to the National Register, be it individually or as a contributing property. So let's say that this house was included as a contributing property, a house with 2 outbuildings. But today we have the house and 1 outbuilding, or maybe none of them. It's just the house. And we've got an applicant that wants to reconstruct the building that was there. It's very tricky to have that happen because it would have to be done in kind. So if this person is able to come up with, plans, photos, maybe not even plans, but they're designing something that's going to look exactly what was there. Even that is tricky because primarily our program does not deal with new construction. The state program does allow for additions, but the addition can only be a certain percentage of what the main dwelling would be. You couldn't have, a house whose footprint is 25% on the lot, and then you're going to make an addition that's 50%. It cannot be larger than the contributing building.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I sort of hit a bunch of different things.
No, and it's
on
fine
that.
because it's actually answering a number of questions that are piggybacked, and like, for example, an additional question was about people being able to purchase and close out, and we're asking if they applied prior to closing, and the question is they can't. One question, I know you said the minimum was 5,000 for an application. Is there a limit, an upper limit is a question that came up, or not?
For depreciable properties, no, there's no spending limit.
Okay.
For the homeowner, it's $30,000. That is the cap. Now let's say we've got a homeowner that has an extensive amount of work. They can plan it out. For example, I know that I've gone through my building, and these 10 things are these need to be addressed right now. And I can get a contractor in, and I know that it's going to hit right at about, I'm going to wind up spending $30,000 for that. These other items, they need to get done, but not as much as that first 10. So what you can do is address those major issues, and then you are allowed to come back and reapply 24 months after the first Part 2 was signed. I should have mentioned that before. For homeowners, this program's not a one-shot deal. You are allowed to come back.
And that's very important.
So if you have to phase out your project so that you can, make sure that you're making the most out of this, that's allowable.
And to the point, there was a question that was for multi-year projects, at what point should the Part 3 be submitted? I think what's clear is that you can apply once your Part 2 is done. You have 24 months to complete it. Now you can come back to finance to apply for a second or a third phase, but you have to make sure to remember you cannot start the work on that next phase until you've reapplied to the program, because that resets each time. And I think that's where there could be some confusion. You can apply for 3 phases, but you can only start each phase every 2 years after you have gone through the process of doing your Part 2 certification and doing the work. It has to be sequential, correct?
I may have, so if a property owner has their Part 2 and they're on their own in-house, phasing it out, deciding, this is what I'm going to do. They cannot, if they want to put those, I had said before, 10 items. If they want to put those 10 items, describe them all, they've given me their contractor quotes, and we're moving forward. They can come back after 24 months of the Part 2 being signed and certified to come back and do additional work. The important thing to remember is don't do any work until your Part 2 is signed and certified.
Okay. Well, I'd like to, I think it's going on 7:15 soon. And I know there's still a lot of questions, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time and Kara's time, our guest too. So what I would like to do, and I did forget, Kara, I had meant to turn on, to ask you to turn on the video during the Q&A question. And, we got talking in that. But what I would like to do is, I think it's been I really appreciated, the feedback. I know there's a lot of appreciation in the chat box for, the information that you've shared. And there's a lot. I think everybody will appreciate your willingness to do follow-up questions. And I know we already have a list of seminars. We might come back and knock on your door again. But meanwhile, I think I would like to thank you. I would like to ask you to turn on your camera again. And I would like to also circle back to our PDI president, Mike McGrath, to see.
Doesn't appear that I can. I think you have to do that.
I have to request it from you. Okay. I feel very much in control, right? So,
okay, there we go.
But and if you would stop sharing your screen, then everybody can kind of see. That would be great. So no, thank you so very much for your time, for the information. Thank you for all of the questions. I do know I see some questions about, how about flipping properties? How about timeline? I promise we're keeping and saving the chat. So if there are any questions in there that have not been answered, we will do a brief answer, maybe a follow-up email to attendees. And again, the recording will be made available. But I would like to thank you. And then I would like to, let you any last words, and obviously let Mike wrap this up and take us home. So Kara, anything,
It was a pleasure to be here with you all tonight. I'm very proud to manage this program. And it's a pleasure to work with everyone. So if anyone's got a question, there are no dumb questions. Ask away. I'm happy to help however I can. So, and hopefully everyone saw my email up there. It was hanging up on the screen for a little bit there. So if anybody's got a question, again, the best way to reach me is through the email, and we can get started.
Okay, perfect.
Well, thank you so much, Kara, and Leila, thank you for moderating our webinar. What a great webinar it was, Kara. And I think the evidence is in the good questions that came out and the good answers that people got. And your offer to continue helping, of course, is a vital part of why our state government is here. And, the great thing about tax credits in my mind is it saves money and it saves our history. What a combination. That's a true win-win situation.
And it creates jobs.
It does.
And it creates jobs. So thanks again to everyone who attended this evening. We're glad that you signed on with us. We'll be offering more of these in the future. And again, if you'd like to support the work of Preservation Delaware, you can go to our website at preservationdE.org. And as Leila said, we will try to follow up on any remaining questions and make sure you get an answer via an email or other communication. And don't forget that this webinar, along with others, will be on our website sometime in the future and on our YouTube channel. So you can go back and share this with other people in your community, friends, neighbors, those that are in your industry. We'd welcome them to come and view this as well. So again, thanks to everyone. Thanks to our presenters, and thanks for everyone for supporting PDI. It's been great. Good evening.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Take care.